Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Coach Cody podcast. Took a little breather from the podcast last 2 weeks, but I am back. And last week, I was actually planning to do a podcast on, the difference between burnout and discipline. And, I always like to stress the importance of rest and recovery, but I want to go a little bit of a different direction this week just to make sure the pendulum hasn't swung too far in the wrong direction. So I feel like 2015 or so, very much the focus was like grind culture, hustle culture, right? Don't sleep when you're dead, no breaks, no days off, push yourself as hard as you can, no pain, no gain. And then we kind of swung over to where we're kind of at currently, where we're almost allergic to discomfort, and it can be confusing. The messaging can be confusing if it's like, make sure to rest, recovery, self-care, but then it's like, oh yeah, push yourself. You still gotta work through shit and tough it out and build some grit. So how do you find that kind of happy medium or middle? It is individual, and it does kind of take getting to know yourself, and also being able to differentiate between whether you're on the verge of burnout or, whether you're on the verge of just not doing enough because you can't build momentum, because you feel like if it's hard that you're doing something wrong, because anything worth having is going to take some discomfort, some hard work, and you're not always going to be motivated. So I wanted to dive in to help you kind of differentiate between, what might be normal as far as the discomfort and the difficulty when you're pursuing a goal, especially in fitness. That is what I specialize in. But this can apply to anything like your career, whatever it is that you're working towards. So one of the biggest reasons I think that we feel like we're always maybe pushing ourselves too hard, that we're doing too much, is that we're kind of addicted to feeling good, right? We have social media. We have a lot of things at our fingertips that we don't really need to work as hard for anymore. And we're constantly getting messages from social media of, that's how we went through the hustle culture situation. And then people got burned out because they hustled too hard. And now we're in this kind of comfy phase where, hustle culture is bad. You don't need to grind yourself into the ground. Actually, make sure you're resting all day. Don't move. Self-care, recovery. So anywho, social media promotes like balance and ease, but it can be misinterpreted as hard is wrong. We're kind of geared to avoid discomfort because survival, right? Back in the day, we're just kind of genetically predisposed to avoid the discomfort of things. But we live in different times. We gotta get a little uncomfortable. Just like, our ancestors probably had to get uncomfortable to chase down whatever they wanted to eat. Just because it was hard doesn't mean they should have stopped. It's hard because you want to survive. So most people, unfortunately, would rather be comfortable than capable. And you don't want to fall into that category. So avoiding discomfort equals avoiding becoming who you truly want to be or who you truly are capable of being. And growth, it's not comfortable. Growth might feel like resistance. It might feel like frustration. It might feel like boredom. It might feel like doubt. These are all things you're going to experience in a fitness journey or in any journey in life. And it's just a necessary part of the process that we need to expect. So some examples: when you're cutting, you're going to be hungry. You're going to feel fatigue. But that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. That just means it's part of the process. Sure, there's things that we can do to mitigate these feelings, but it's going to be part of it no matter what, especially if you're in contest prep. You can't really do much towards the end. You're going to be hungry and you're going to be fatigued. You're going to feel like shit, but it's temporary and you have a goal that you want to achieve. So you push through the discomfort, if it means enough to you, and you come out on the other side and you grow as a person. You look back and you're like, damn, I did that. I am capable of that. How much more am I capable of? So it just shows like hard things are not bad things. When it comes to building muscle, sometimes that might feel a little easier than, being hungry and tired, but building muscle is a slow process and it's repetitive and it takes consistency, and you might get a little bit bored, but that also doesn't mean it's bad or you're doing anything wrong. It is just part of the process. So there's just parts of the process of things that we need to learn to accept. And there's no hacks, there's no way around it. And the more you avoid those parts of the process, the longer it's going to take, or the more frustrated you're going to feel because there's no way around them. There's a fine line between pushing too hard and pushing through. And how do you differentiate? How do you know if you're pushing too hard or not hard enough? So there's some questions that you could ask yourself. So am I under recovered or am I under prepared? Lots of chaos can occur and things can be uncomfortable and hard because, you didn't properly plan and prepare. Planning can go a long way. It can make things, it still can be a little uncomfortable to learn the process of planning and kind of create new habits. But being underprepared is extremely uncomfortable. Another question, am I avoiding growth? Or am I misaligned or just uncomfortable? I think a lot of us misinterpret feeling uncomfortable as being misaligned with what we're trying to do, but discomfort is required. So so pushing through equals you're doing the right thing by pushing through. If you're aligned with the discomfort, if you still want what you are pursuing, as long as you still want that, it is okay to push. If pushing too hard equals you're going to feel depleted and resentful. So that can happen even if you do still want the thing you're going after. But a lot of times you might find if you're feeling, depleted and resentful, you might look into if you're even interested in achieving the thing that you want to achieve. That's not saying that you're not going to feel depleted and resentful for things that you want, but you just kind of have to learn yourself and see if you're pushing yourself so hard that you don't want anything to do with the thing that you're going after. So that's when, the usual, make sure you're taking recovery days, you're taking breaks, because it's going to be important so that you don't end up burned out. But again, you have to push yourself still. So you just got to learn your limits. And that's when there's this facade that you should have balance in all aspects of your life. But you have to toe the line of, you got to toe the line of balance before you can even know what is too much and what is not enough. If you see a guy walking a tightrope, he's not just walking straight, like, hands to his side. You see him kind of moving from left to right, sometimes almost falling over on the right, sometimes almost falling over the left, but regaining balance. So that's kind of how journeys go. Sometimes you're like a little bit more balanced to one side than the other, but the most important thing is that you just don't fall off the rope completely. And it's a learning process. I mean, sometimes the only way we learn is to reach burnout. So I guess I wouldn't even be afraid to reach burnout in some circumstances, because as long as you learn from it, then at least you know how it feels and how to avoid it the next time. Kind of like you don't really know what failure feels like in the gym until you do it. Not that I'm recommending burnout, but I feel like anyone who's gone on some sort of journey has probably experienced it and has learned to recognize the signs in themselves when they're starting to feel burned out, or recognize when you're pushing too hard. But again, it can take some time. I'm still fucking learning the signs of burnout for myself and when I'm pushing too hard, that sort of thing. So it's not an easy process to learn. And sometimes an outside perspective is a good idea, which is why I have a therapist who is very helpful in these circumstances where I might think that I'm just being lazy. And, she might be like, I don't think that's the case because of you're doing X, Y, Z. And so having an outside perspective can sometimes be very helpful, whether it's a partner or a therapist. Sometimes, we're our own worst enemy and get in our own way and can be stubborn and hard-headed. So again, that's why it's important to know yourself. Another thing to accept throughout this whole process. We have a difficult time with this, but motivation isn't always going to be there. I know I've said this a million times, but it is something you need to accept even from the beginning of when you start something. When you start anything, whether it's a fitness journey or whatever, you're going to feel real good at the beginning. You're going to feel excited. It's that honeymoon phase, especially like that first 2 weeks to a month in a fitness journey. It feels new. It feels exciting. You're excited to make progress. But then the motivation kind of dies down a bit because it gets more routine. It gets a little repetitive and boring. And then you kind of lose sight because it doesn't feel as exciting. But that is a normal part of the process. Motivation does come back around, but it's just a matter of accepting the fact that motivation is fleeting. And it's good to ride that motivation wave when it's there. But when it's not, it doesn't mean that you're not aligned with what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you don't want it, what it was that you started this journey for. It just means this is part of the process and you got to work through it. Eventually it will come back around, especially as you make progress, especially if you see like the seeds of your hard work. Like once you see those progress photos that you're comparing from 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and you're like, damn, I did that. That is when the motivation comes back around, because you see how the progress you made when you kept going, even when it was hard. And that is the key. You got to keep going, even when it gets hard, even when it gets uncomfortable. So, you got to use structure and use identity. Who do you want to be moving forward? That way you can, stay aligned. Ask yourself those questions of, is this still aligned with what I want to do when you're feeling like the motivation isn't there? You want to show up because you said you would. You're not failing because you're not inspired. You're growing because you're showing up anyways. So, yeah, to wrap things up, not every season of life is going to feel good, and that's okay. If we didn't have the lows, we wouldn't have the highs. And it's all about experiencing the whole spectrum of emotions and spectrum of life, the ups and downs. It'd be so boring if, we were just happy all the time. And it would be very miserable if we were just unhappy all the time. You don't want to be like that either. So, growth could include tension, friction, uncertainty. I fucking hate uncertainty. I have OCD. It's like the uncertainty intolerance disease. But unfortunately, it's just life. Nothing is certain. And the only thing you can really be certain about is your values, like what you stand for, what you want. And as long as you keep your eye on those things and live your life according to those values, you're going to be okay. So, yeah, don't push yourself too hard, but make sure you push yourself, or else you're just going to be treading water. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for listening. I've got some good podcasts ahead, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss them. But again, if you have any comments or topic suggestions, leave them in the comments. Would love to hear from you. And I just appreciate you listening to me ramble. It's been quite some time. I've been putting out these episodes now. And so for anyone who takes the time out of their day to click on this episode and give it a listen, much, much appreciated. And feel free to share as well if you think someone else might find this helpful. All right. Peace out, guys. I will talk to you next time.